And we are live and ready to start.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Kavler. I am the presiding judge in this matter. Before we proceed, I want to address a couple sort of technical issues for the attorneys and witnesses throughout the hearing, throughout the trial today. If you are the witness who is testifying or either of the attorneys questioning that witness, I'd like you to leave your video on during that time. So the two attorneys, the attorney who will be doing direct, the attorney who will do being cross, and the attorney and the witness will leave their video on. All others on the screen, all other attorneys and witnesses will have their video off during that time frame. I'm going to ask the panelists to leave their video on during opening and closing statements, but then to turn them off during the witness testimony. So it looks like we're ready to proceed. Is the plaintiff ready to proceed to the trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed to trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Let's see. And the scoring judges all have their copies of the trial rosters and their scoring sheets. Okay. I want to remind the teams that there will be no recesses allowed during today's competition, with the exception of those granted for a health emergency, and especially not between the end of a witness examination and the beginning of closing arguments. We've already done the conflict checks with the scoring panelists. There are no conflicts, correct? Okay. For the teams, any disputes arising out of this competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. I want to remind you that your compliance with the time requirements will be considered in the individual scoring performances, and that you don't have any coaches or other team members in the jury box. Well, that's really not applicable, I guess, in the virtual setting. First thing I'm going to do is I would ask the plaintiff to please introduce your team members and your witnesses.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Rachel Kidder, and I, along with my co-counsel, represent the plaintiff, Dakota Weirs. I will be giving the closing argument as well as conducting the direct examination of Carson Durst and the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt. May my co-counsel introduce themselves?
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Peterson, and I will be giving the opening statement as well as conducting the direct examination of Dakota Weirs and the cross-examination of Skylar Weirs.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Esther Fan, and I will be conducting the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers and the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams. May our client and witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Kenya David, and I am Dakota Weirs.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Landon Stuckey, and I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel and members of the jury. My name is Violet Thompson, and I am Carson Durst.
Good morning. Would the defense like to introduce themselves?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. I am Shannon Sachs. I will be doing the opening, the direct of Dr. Devin Williams, and the cross of Dr. Casey Rogers. And I would now like my co-counsel to introduce themselves.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Your Honor. I will be doing the direct examination of Skylar Weirs, the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs, as well as the closing argument.
And your name is?
Ashley Dunn, sorry.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsels and members of the jury. I am Ian Duran, and I will be doing the direct examination of Blake Doncourt and the cross-examination of Carson Durst. May my witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jada Friedman, and I will be playing Blake Doncourt today.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Sophia Suisa, and I'll be playing Skylar Weirs today.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Chloe Castaneda, and I'm Dr. Devin Williams today.
Okay, good morning, everyone. what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask each of the, so in order to maintain a level of professionalism and uphold the code of ethical conduct during and after these mock trial proceedings, all members of the gallery, scoring panels, and teams shall be sworn in for the oath of the code of ethical conduct. So I'd ask all the team members to please raise their right hands. Do you promise that the presentation you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Okay. Witnesses, please raise your right hand. Witnesses, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to your witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition? Thank you. I guess we don't have gallery members, so I don't need to swear them in. The scoring panelists, please raise your right hand. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and as objectively as possible in accordance with the facts, procedures, and rules of the mock trial competition? Thank you, everyone. From the plaintiff, are there any preliminary matters that we need to address before we go to opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
First, in accordance with the rules of mock trial, it is our understanding that when admitting an exhibit into evidence, we must screen share that exhibit while we lay the foundation. We request that that constructively be kept out of the eyes of the jury until we move to publish that exhibit.
Granted.
Next, Your Honor, in accordance with the rules of mock trial, we request that in the event of any technical difficulty, the clock be stopped immediately and that time not count toward either side.
Granted.
Next, Your Honor, there are two witnesses with the last name of Weirs in this case, Dakota Weirs and Skylar Weirs. We request, when appropriate, to refer to them by first name only for clarity's sake.
Of course, that's permitted.
And finally, Your Honor, it is our understanding that we must provide you with a list of stipulated facts if you do not have your own, and we are prepared to screen share those for you.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and screen share the stipulated facts now? Have those. So those are, thank you. Anything further from the plaintiff?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Are there any preliminary matters from the defense?
Just one, Your Honor.
Yes, go ahead.
The defense requests permission for our attorneys to either sit or stand when performing direct and cross examinations according to the space that they are in.
Granted, all the attorneys can remain seated if they so choose, or can stand just as long as you're visible on the screen and that we can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay, and just for clarity's sake, if attorneys choose to stand, they don't need to ask permission to stand during the hearing. You can just do that as you see appropriate or you feel most comfortable doing it. Okay, Miss, let's see. Oh, it's Miss Peterson will be giving the opening for the plaintiff. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you ready to proceed?
I am, Your Honor.
You can go ahead.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. That is what the evidence will establish today. Lush Fertilizer will present itself as a good citizen that cares about the environment, but it knew that its products can cause cancer, and it covered up that risk because of greed. Now a beautiful young woman who used Lush Fertilizer has been stricken with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. It is not just facing a devastating disability, but possibly the end of her life. Good morning, members of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Peterson, and I am honored to represent Dakota Weirs, an outstanding young woman whose life has been tragically altered by Lush Fertilizer. We will prove to you today, by a preponderance of the evidence, that Lush has crushed her dreams by creating a product that caused her non-Hodgkin lymphoma. In doing so, Lush was negligent. Let me tell you about Dakota Weirs. She was an active member in her community who regularly volunteered at the homeless shelter, a member of the Honor Society, president of her school. But what she loved dearly was her grandfather, who taught her how to play the piano. She was not just an accomplished pianist, but was accepted into Juilliard, one of the world's most prestigious music schools. Ms. Weirs was also a hard worker, and beginning at age 14, she had a job with Haven Landscaping. Lush wants these kinds of businesses to use its products, and indeed, Ms. Weirs used its fertilizer all the time. Unfortunately, that fertilizer contained a cancer-causing chemical called Drufo. After years of using Drufo in her job, Ms. Weirs became extremely ill. She was bruising easily, was constantly feeling fatigued, and began to experience shortness of breath, frequent chills, chest pains, swollen lymph nodes, and depression. She lost massive amounts of weight. Her abdomen swelled to double its normal size. The doctors finally diagnosed her with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Then, Ms. Weirs learned of a connection between Drufo and cancer. It turns out someone had disclosed documents proving Lush knew about the health risks Drufo posed and covered it up. That is against the law, and that is why we are here today, to seek justice for the harm Lush fertilizer has caused. We will first call Dr. Casey Rogers, an expert witness in agriculture and chemistry. He will testify that Drufo is carcinogenic. Dr. Rogers conducted experiments that proved this. He will testify that to a high degree of scientific probability, Dakota developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma due to prolonged exposure to Drufo. Next, we will call Carson Durst, a former employee of Lush Fertilizer. Ms. Durst will show you Lush's own internal studies and an email proving Lush knew about Drufo's danger. They then buried that information because making Drufo safe would cut into its profits. Finally, you will hear from Ms. Weirs herself. She will tell you all that Lush Fertilizer has taken from her. Her testimony will be compelling. The defense will call Blake Doncourt, the CEO of Lush, who deliberately disregarded the safety reports about Drufo. She could have eliminated all risk by simply baking Drufo, which would not have changed its effectiveness. But she didn't do that, members of the jury, because she needed more money to pay for a costly divorce. The defense will also shockingly call Dakota Weir's twin sibling Skylar Weirs, a 20-year-old conspiracy theorist, to testify against her. Why would a defendant be so desperate? Because apparently she is the best expert Lush could find. Skylar's motive in being an expert is to pay off her gambling debts. Finally, the defense will call Dr. Devin Williams, who will admit that she is financially biased. She will also testify that Drufo was banned in the entire European Union. The sheep's clothing is falling apart at the seams. Members of the jury, Lush Fertilizer is not saving the planet. It is killing precisely the people who are supposed to be using its products. Our burden today is to prove that by the slightest of weight, it is more likely than not Drufo caused Ms. Weir's cancer. We do not have to eliminate other causes, and you'll hear nothing from the defense, absolutely nothing, pointing to any other product that could have done this. On the contrary, Lush documents and scientific evidence will prove that Drufo can and did cause cancer. My co-counsel, Rachel Kidder, will ask you at the end of this case to find in favor of Dakota Weirs and give her the justice she deserves. Demask the wolf and expose Lush Fertilizer for what it truly is, a company that puts corporate profits above consumer protection. Thank you.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes, I'm ready when our timekeeper is ready.
You can proceed when you're ready.
Thank you. Your Honor and members of the jury, I am Shannon Sachs, and I'm representing Lush Fertilizer here today. This case is an unfortunate case of a girl trying to explain the unexplainable through a fertilizer company. Before I begin, I would like to say for myself and my client that we acknowledge that this is an extremely unfortunate case, and we truly sympathize with Dakota's condition. No matter the outcome of this case, Dakota is, without a doubt, still suffering from cancer, and for that, she has our most sincere condolences. We hope that she finds peace in the future. However, we do not want it to come at the expense of a company that is not to blame. The company in question, Lush Fertilizer, cares about the environment, and more importantly, about its users. The evidence will show that Lush donates 10% of their earnings towards environmental causes. In fact, the whole reason that they developed and used Drufo is because of all the scientific evidence supporting its environmental benefits. And considering this amount of care that Lush puts into their products for the well-being of the environment, I ask, why would one assume that they do not also put in the same amount of care, if not more, when it comes to the well-being of their customers? And furthermore, this situation was escalated by the show that the media put on. Everyone had to find out about Drufo's role in Lush Fertilizer products in a biased news story that focused solely on what new information people uncovered rather than the measures that Lush previously went through to keep their users safe. The media didn't mention the fact that Jufo is clearly listed as an ingredient on Lush products. They didn't list all the safety precautions that Lush detailed for their users, and they didn't state that there are no viable and published works that conclude that there is a definite link between Jufo and cancer in humans. Instead, they incited fear and rage in Dakota and the rest of the public, so they had no logical choice but to point fingers at Lush Fertilizer. Lush Fertilizer is the manufacturer. They research extensively, they make the products, and they sell them. And after that, all safety precautions have to be understood by the buyer. And in this case, this is Haven Landscaping. It is up to Haven Landscaping to sufficiently educate their employees on the different types of chemicals that they are dealing with and enforce the use of protective gear, especially when such guidelines for protective gear are clearly labeled on the package and their employees are as young as 14 years old. Now, it is no secret that one may be exposed to harmful chemicals when using fertilizer. That's true for any company. However, this means that one should take the necessary safety precautions, which Dakota did not. The hard reality of this case is that the cause of Dakota's cancer is undetermined, and that a simple correlation does not guarantee causation. There are hundreds of ways that someone may develop cancer, and as of now, no one can definitively say what caused it in Dakota. Nothing that you will hear today says that Lush Fertilizer directly caused her cancer. And now, to really understand Lush Fertilizer's role in the case, we will call upon 3 witnesses: Blake Donacourt, Skylar Weirs, and Dr. Devin Williams. Blake Donacourt, the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer, will give you a look at the inner workings and logic and research behind including Jufo in their products. You will then hear from Skylar Weirs, who will provide a detailed description of Jufo in today's agritech, and how, in actuality, Jufo is a safe product for the environment. Lastly, we will call upon Dr. Devin Williams, who leads the Toxicology Research and Development Labs at Lush Fertilizer and is the chair of the company's ethics committee. Here we will learn about what Jufo does on a chemical level and how it cannot be proven to be the cause of Dakota's cancer. Lush Fertilizer and myself are both sorry for Dakota's case. However, the specific cause of her illness is unknown and undetermined. Your Honor and members of the jury, at the end of this case, you will see that in this truly unfortunate event, Lush Fertilizer is not at fault and the plaintiff will not be able to meet their burden. Thank you.
Ms. Fan, how would the claimant, how would the plaintiff like to proceed?
The plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers.
Rogers, and who's the attorney who is cross-examining Dr. Rogers? Ms. Sachs, can you please keep your video on as well? Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Fan, you can proceed.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Casey Rogers.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Rogers?
I am a professor in the horticulture and entomology department at the University of California at Berkeley.
Please tell the jury about your education.
I received a Bachelor's of Science degree in agriculture and chemistry and a PhD in agriculture and entomology from the University of California at Berkeley.
In your professional career, have you had a particular area of study or emphasis?
Yes, the negative and harmful effects of extended human exposure to various chemicals.
Let's discuss that. What have you done in your studies of the harmful effects of chemicals?
I have published 4 extensive studies on the negative and harmful effects that various chemicals have on humans, and specifically the negative effect that Jufo has on humans. I have also studied the chemicals themselves with a mass spectrometer.
Has your research been utilized by others?
Yes, my research has been used in litigation. It's been admitted before administrative advisory boards, and I have made recommendations to agricultural companies and regulatory agencies on precautions that should be taken by workers who are exposed to chemicals.
You mentioned litigation. Have you ever testified as an expert witness before?
No, I haven't. This is my first time in court.
Finally, how long have you been studying Jufo and its harmful effects?
Since the time it was introduced into the market, so about 20 years now.
Your Honor, the plaintiff offers Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert witness concerning the effects on the human body of prolonged exposure to chemicals and specifically exposure to Drufo.
Ms. Sachs, any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So Dr. Rogers will be admitted in those areas.
Dr. Rogers, we all know this case is about Drufo. Please tell the jury just what Drufo is.
Drufo is a chemical used in fertilizer. It binds to the nitrogen to preserve it and keep it intact. It was developed by Lush Fertilizer. I have personally analyzed the chemical makeup of each of Lush Fertilizer's products, and Drufo is in all of them.
What drew your attention to Drufo in the first place?
Well, when it first hit the market, I believe that Drufo was unusually rushed into production, leading me to conclude that its safety was not sufficiently studied prior to giving it to the consumer.
So what did you do?
I conducted my own study to see if there were harmful effects on persons who were exposed to Drufo over long periods of time.
Tell the jury about your study, please.
I tested 3 groups of people. One group had never been exposed to Drufo before. This is known as the control group. The second group had occasionally been exposed to Drufo, and the third group had been exposed to Drufo on almost a daily basis. The study monitored the groups of people for a number of years following the exposure.
Dr. Rogers, what did you conclude?
My study showed a significant increase in serious health conditions and diagnoses in those who were exposed to Drufo as compared to the control group. Specifically, my study found higher incidences of cancer, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
How significant was the increased risk of cancer?
Those with just an occasional exposure had a 500% increased risk of cancer. And those with a prolonged exposure to Drufo had a 1,000% increased risk of cancer.
Dr. Rogers, are you familiar with Ms. Dakota Weir's level of exposure?
Yes, I am. I reviewed her medical and employment records.
Based on her exposure, what was her risk?
Well, Ms. Weirs was exposed to Drufo regularly for 4 years, meaning prolonged exposure to Drufo since it is in all of Lush Fertilizer's products. This exposure gave her the highest risk. Ms. Weirs had a 1,000% increased risk of cancer because of Drufo.
Dr. Rogers, based on all your study and analysis, have you formed an opinion concerning Ms. Weir's exposure to Drufo?
Yes, I have.
What is that opinion?
To a reasonable degree of scientific probability, there is a correlation between exposure to Drufo and Ms. Weir's non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
You just mentioned non-Hodgkin lymphoma. In your research and investigation, did you study non-Hodgkin lymphoma or NHL?
Yes, I did.
What is NHL?
NHL is a specific type of cancer caused by exposure to an environmental condition. It affects the white blood cells, also known as lymphocytes. And since the lymphocytes are part of the immune system and the immune system is affected by NHL, the body can become compromised and would be more susceptible to disease.
What is the survival rate of NHL?
The 5-year survival rate for NHL is only 72%.
Is there any treatment for NHL?
Yes, attempts can be made to control it with chemotherapy, surgery, or other efforts, but these efforts are expensive and always carry a degree of risk.
Can NHL be cured?
No, there is no cure for non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Ms. Weirs will have to live with this horrible cancer and these terrible symptoms for the rest of her life because of Drufo.
In your research and investigation, did you study any way to stop Drufo from entering the body?
Yes, I recommended the use of gloves, mask, and some other protective gear, but the results of the study on protective gear were inconclusive because the protective gear is not usually supplied to the workers, and I didn't have sufficient time to study the long-term effects of the protective gear. So, short of discontinuing the use of Drufo altogether, there is no completely safe way to stop it from entering the body.
Dr. Rogers, in your professional opinion, did Ms. Weir's NHL have anything to do with her exposure to Drufo?
Yes. To a high degree of scientific probability, Ms. Weir's developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma because of her exposure to Drufo.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers. Thank you for being here today. Now, let's start with the study conducted. You said you did a study on the effects of Drufo in those who worked on farms and those who used products with Drufo every day, and you compared it to those who had never come in contact with Drufo at all, right?
I'm not
Objection,
sure.
Your Honor. Compound.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you, Your Honor.
I muted myself. I apologize. The objection's overruled. You can answer the question, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you.
Could you please re-ask?
Yes, you said you did a study on the effects of Drufo in those who worked on farms and those who used the products with Drufo every day, and you said that you compared those to those who have never come in contact with Drufo at all, right?
My study did include farm laborers, but it included a variety of different people, and it did include three different groups of people that I compared their exposure to the different groups.
But you only looked at fertilizers with Drufo and not any other type of fertilizer without it, didn't you?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
In this specific study that you conducted, you only were working with the effects of fertilizers that contained Drufo and not fertilizers that did not contain it, right?
Well, my study was on Drufo, as Drufo is what caught my attention. Drufo is what has a causal link to non-Hodgkin lymphoma and other cancers. So my study was on Drufo. So no, I didn't study other chemicals in this specific study, that is.
So you neglected to include this very important group to compare your study to?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
You neglected to include a group of people who did not use a fertilizer, who did use a fertilizer that did not contain Drufo, and you did not, or to compare to, correct?
Well, one group was the control group, which had never been exposed to Drufo. So I'm sure that there were some people in the control group who used fertilizers that didn't have Drufo. That's why they're in the control group, because they weren't exposed to Drufo. So there were people in my study, I'm sure, in the control group who used other fertilizers that weren't exposed to Drufo.
All right. And so you are confident in your study, right?
Of course.
Then why is your study not published?
I don't believe I discussed that in my witness statement.
All right. Well, then moving on, you said that all of your information that you are telling us today are coming, or about the effects of Drufo on humans, are coming from the study that you conducted yourself, right?
I didn't discuss that on direct, but I believe that's true.
And you also said you have a degree in agriculture and entomology.
Yes.
And that relates to cultivating soil and studying insects, correct?
Yes, it does.
And they are not focused on cancer, are they?
My degree is not focused on cancer, no. I'm not a medical doctor.
And in your research, you found that people who were exposed to Drufo were done so by either breathing it or physically coming into contact with it, correct?
Yeah, the two main exposures to Drufo are either caused by breathing in the substance or by absorption into the skin.
And you recommended long sleeves and pants, as well as a medical grade mask when using the product?
I did, yes, but the results on the study on protective gear was inconclusive, like I said.
However, with these recommendations, it would likely lower one's risk of exposure if they were to wear them, correct?
Well, the results on the study were inconclusive.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Fan, redirect.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. You were excused. Let's see. So, Ms. Kidder, how would
Yes,
you
Your
like to
Honor.
proceed? How would you like to proceed?
The plaintiff calls Carson Durst.
Sorry. Mr. Duran, okay, you're the cross-examiner. Okay. All right, Ms. Kidder, you can proceed.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself and spell your last name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Carson Durst, and that is spelled D-U-R-S-T.
Ms. Durst, what do you do for a living?
I'm currently the lead product developer for Terrace Greenery, which manufactures lawn products.
Did you have any previous employment before you worked at Terrace Greenery?
Yes, before I was with Lush Fertilizer from 2003 to 2006 on the research and development team. I first started out as an intern and then was later promoted to a product development engineer after 3 months.
Please explain to the jury the circumstances of your being hired by Lush.
Well, I grew up best friends with Charles Doncourt, the son of the CEO, Blake Doncourt. I was very close with their family. And we both went to Arizona State, where I got a bachelor's in chemical engineering. And that's when I graduated, I applied to and was hired by Lush Fertilizer.
You previously stated that you were a product development engineer. What does that job entail?
Well, my job was to develop different chemicals used on the lawns.
What was your biggest assignment when working at Lush Fertilizer?
My biggest assignment was definitely working to develop Drufo, the patented bonding agent Lush was developing when I was hired.
What was your first assignment with Drufo?
Well, for our first in-house study, I was tasked with researching one of the chemical compounds that comprise Drufo. And in my research, I discovered a study concluding that Drufo may be carcinogenic in rats.
Did you do anything with that study?
Yes, I had a lab notebook, which was the general way we documented what we did in the lab. And I documented that study in my notebook on, I believe, June 10th of 2003.
Please look at Exhibit 3, which should be on the screen momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's a copy of the study I documented in my notebook.
How do you know?
Well, I found this study and I personally documented it.
Is Exhibit 3 a fair and accurate copy of that study you documented in your notebook?
Yes, I believe it is.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves for the admission of Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor. No objection.
Exhibit 3 will be admitted.
Ms. Durst, permission to publish, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Ms. Durst, if you could please direct your attention to the column labeled results and read the first sentence of the first paragraph until the phrase significant at the 0.01 level.
Our results show a statistically significant dose-related increase of malignant tumor-bearing animals significant at the 0.01 level.
And if you could please direct your attention to the column labeled results and read the first sentence of that first paragraph as well.
The results of this carcinogenicity bioassay, our first long-term carcinogenicity bioassay on C3N09P, demonstrate C3N09P's potential carcinogenicity at a dose level close to a normal monthly intake for humans in occupations involving frequent, unprotected exposure to commercial fertilizers.
What is C3N09P?
It's the chemical formula for Drufo.
Getting back to what you documented in your lab notebook, did anyone routinely review those?
Yes, our product manager, Jerry Langley, did.
What would typically happen after those were reviewed?
Well, Jerry would compile the lab's findings and include them in a report to senior management.
Did you ever hear anything about this particular report again?
Yes, actually in, I believe, September of 2003, Lush Management told us that they were going to do another in-house study relating to whether or not Drufo is carcinogenic in humans.
How did they inform you of that study?
In an email.
Please turn your attention to Exhibit 4, which should be on the screen momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's a copy of the email I received from Jerry Langley concerning the second study on Drufo.
How do you know?
Well, I received this email and I read it.
Is Exhibit 4 a fair and accurate copy of that email you received from Ms. Langley?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves for the admission of Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Any objection, Mr. Duran?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. Exhibit 4 will be admitted.
Permission to publish?
Yes, you may publish the exhibit.
Ms. Durst, if you look at the top of this email, you will see a list of recipients. Is there anyone whose name is on that list who is in court today?
Yes, Blake Doncourt's name is on the list, and I believe they're in court today, yes.
Turning to the contents of the email, if you could please read the first sentence of the second paragraph.
Following our lab's June Drufo study, concerns have arisen regarding generalized findings of potential carcinogenic qualities identified in samples produced during a period early in the year.
Did you do anything in response to this email?
I got to work on the assignment that I was given.
Were you given any specific instructions from management?
Yes, the lab was encouraged to document data in a manner that supported the company's hypothesis.
Was a second study of Drufo ever actually conducted?
Yes, it was.
What happened next with regard to this second study?
We had a meeting with Jerry Langley and Alex Monroe, who is an upper level manager.
What was the topic of this meeting?
It was on our conclusions regarding Drufo being toxic.
Were there any specific conclusions presented to Ms. Langley and Alex Monroe?
Yes, there were. A scientist said that in their study, they found that Drufo could contain a carcinogen and that it could be linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Was there any response from either of the two managers?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Ms. Kidder, any response?
Your Honor, under Rule 801D2, this is not hearsay, but rather a statement made by a party opponent. Ms. Durst, if allowed to testify, would have said that Alex Monroe, an upper echelon manager, said to keep it in the walls until they figure out what they are doing. As a manager of the company, Alex Monroe would have been authorized to make statements on behalf of Lush Fertilizer. Therefore, this falls under Rule 801D2 and is not hearsay.
May I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, this question is being directed to the witness to state the truth of the matter of what was said by Mr. Alex Monroe. However, Alex Monroe is not here to testify today, so I cannot cross-examine him. Therefore, this falls under hearsay.
Objections overruled.
Was there any response from either of the two managers, Ms. Durst?
Yes, like you said, Alex Monroe told us to keep it in the walls until we figure out what we're doing.
Was a report created of the second study after it was finished?
Yes, it was.
Did you ever see a copy of that report?
I did.
What were the findings?
It said that further analysis is required before we're able to make any conclusions regarding Drufo causing any long-term health effects, including cancer.
Ms. Durst, based on your participation in this research, was this finding accurate?
No, it was incredibly misleading, and it was obvious that data had been excluded from the study.
Did the report say anything else?
Yes, it recommended baking Drufo as part of the production process in order to fully eliminate the possibility that Drufo could be considered carcinogenic.
To your knowledge, was this recommendation taken?
No, it was not. And honestly, if it was, we wouldn't be here today.
After this report telling the company to bake Drufo came out, what was your experience at the company?
I began to receive bad performance reviews, and I was even put on a performance improvement plan. It appeared to me that Jerry Langley had some sort of vendetta against me because of my concerns that Drufo could be carcinogenic.
What did you do then?
I found a job with Terrace Greenery.
Finally, Ms. Durst, to your knowledge, did Lush ever take any steps to inform the public of any risks to using their products?
No, they didn't, and I really wish they did.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Durant, cross.
Good morning, Ms. Durst. You worked at Terrace Greenery, don't you? Or you work at Terrace Greenery?
Yes, I'm currently employed by Terrace Greenery.
And there you are the lead research and project manager?
I'm the lead product developer.
Okay. And before Terrace Greenery, you were working at Lush Fertilizer, is that correct?
Yes, from 2003 to 2006.
Okay. Now let's talk about your relationship with the Doncourts. Would you say you are close friends with Charles Doncourt?
Yes, I grew up with his family.
Would you say you're best friends with him?
At the time I was, we've kind of grown apart, but yeah, at the time I was best friends with Charles.
And Charles' dad, Blake Doncourt, is the CEO of Lush, correct?
Yes, he is.
And ultimately, he was your boss at the time?
Yes, I mean, he was the CEO of Lush.
Okay. And so would you say Mr. Doncourt was influential in your hiring?
Well, I went through the application process. I put in my application and I went through the interviews, and then I was hired as an intern.
Okay, but you did say, and I quote, he pulled some strings for you, did you not?
He may have, but I was qualified for the job.
Okay. So you were fired at Lush Fertilizer, is that correct?
Yes, in 2006.
Okay. And before you were fired, you signed a non-compete agreement, did you not?
When I was hired, I had signed multiple papers. I had completely forgotten about the non-disclosure agreement. So I didn't realize that I was breaking anything.
Okay, but you did sign that at the beginning of your employment, did you?
Apparently I did a long time ago.
Okay. May the witness please refer to Exhibit 5? I think my timekeeper will display that shortly. Thank you. Ms. Durst, do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
It's the non-compete agreement.
Okay. And is this a fair and accurate representation of the non-compete agreement given to you at the beginning of Lush Fertilizer?
I believe it is. I mean, I signed it a long time ago, so.
Okay. And can my timekeeper scroll down for me? Is that your signature at the bottom there?
Yes, it is.
All right. Your Honor, at this time, I would like to admit Exhibit 5 into evidence.
Kidder, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, we object to hearsay.
On what ground? Okay, Mr. Duran, would you like to respond?
Your Honor, this is not hearsay. This is a not to prove the truth. However, this is a in-court document that was signed by the witness, so it does not go to the grounds of hearsay.
Response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
This document was not created in court nor by Ms. Durst.
The document's not here. The document's not hearsay. It's admitted. It's not the statements in the doc. It's not offered to prove the statements in the document are true, but to prove the document itself. So the document's admitted. Objections overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, I would like to you to read along with me as I read the first line of the non-compete agreement, if that is okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
During this employment and for a period of years after the separation of employment for any reason, the employee will not directly or indirectly engage in any competitive business and shall not become directly or indirectly engaged in any business that would benefit from the disclosure of Lush trade secrets. Now, I would like to ask you, did you violate this agreement by taking a position at Terrace Greenery, one of Lush's direct competitors?
I unintentionally violated it, but we came to an agreement where I waited 6 months before I started work at Terrace Greenery.
Okay. And have you broken contractual promises before?
Objection, Your Honor, 403.
Mr. Duran?
I can withdraw the question. Let's move on to your job performance at Lush. Was this your first job out of college? Lush.
Yes, I was hired by Lush like after graduation.
And while being hired at Lush, you quickly were promoted to a higher level position. Is that correct?
Yes, after 3 months, I was promoted to a product development engineer.
I'm sorry, Your
Okay.
Honor. Can I request that if opposing counsel is done with this exhibit, that they remove it from the screen?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Let me re-ask that question for you. You were promoted quickly thereafter you're getting hired as an intern?
Yes,
Right.
after 3 months.
Okay. And soon after that promotion, your your performance reviews began to fall. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, your audio keeps cutting out.
Oh,
couldn't
my
understand.
apologies. Soon thereafter, your performance reviews began to fall, didn't they?
Soon after
Your
and-
promotion. Your promotion.
Well, from the first study, I apologize, the first in-house study, when I found that study, I began to be concerned about the safety of Drufo. And so I believe that Jerry Langley, my product manager, wasn't happy because I was threatening company profits.
Okay, but your reviews began to fall quickly after your promotion. That was shortly after the promotion, wasn't it?
It was after I was complaining and giving them my concerns.
Okay, but in the same time, that was soon after your promotion, was it not? Or that
You
was
say that.
okay. And let's talk about your research into Drufo while you were employed at Lush. You found one study that stated it was carcinogenic in rats, did you not?
I only found one outside study that said that it was carcinogenic in rats, and it did say that for a monthly intake in humans, that it could be carcinogenic, and especially if you're younger. But our own in-house study, we had, like I said at the meeting, there was a scientist that said that Drufo could contain a carcinogen and was, or not was, but could be linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Okay. Can my timekeeper please present the study that has been previously admitted?
Which exhibit is that?
Oh, that is exhibit 3. Yes. Now, oh, it needs to be. Okay. Can you please tell me where this study states anything about Drufo?
Well, in the conclusions, the C3NO9P, that is the chemical formula for Drufo.
Okay, but where does it say Drufo in this study?
Well, it says it where it says C3NO9P.
I'm not asking about C3NOP. I'm asking about the word Drufo. Where does it state the word Drufo?
I'm confused because C3NO9P.
Does this study state the chemical known as Drufo? Not C3NOP, I'm talking about Drufo. The word.
Well, it states the chemical that is Drufo because C3NO9P is the chemical formula for Drufo.
Okay, I'm asking verbiage. Does this state anything about Drufo?
Yes, this study was conducted on Drufo.
Okay, where are the ingredients for Drufo in this study?
The C3NO9P, it's those, like, that's the chemical compound.
Okay, but that is a distinct chemical compound in Drufo, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that is the chemical. Well,
okay.
no, C3NO9P is the chemical formula for Drufo.
Okay, let's move on. After this exhibit can be no longer displayed. Thank you. After looking into this study, you did not find any studies stating that there was any link between cancer and specifically human beings, correct?
I didn't find any outside studies, but our own study done by Lush Fertilizer did find that there is a link between Drufo and cancer, and specifically lymphoma.
Okay. So Lush itself conducted 2 in-house studies, right?
Yes, they did.
All right. And do you know the methodologies that were used in that study?
I don't believe I talked about that in my witness statement. Would you?
Okay, but as an intern, did you know the how these studies were conducted?
Well, I was a part of the study. I conducted my own research on one of the compounds in Drufo.
Okay, and that was a singular compound, singular part of the Drufo itself, correct?
Yes.
That piece of compound. Okay.
It's
and
part of.
You were not a very senior within, like you weren't a senior within the company. Is that correct?
I wasn't a manager, but I was a part of the study that they did.
Okay, so you were not privy to a lot of the data and information available to your more senior colleagues. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Well, yes. I mean, I didn't have all of the information that we collected from our study, but from my participation, I could see that there was information left out of the final conclusions.
All right, so did that limited knowledge of the studies include these methodologies?
I don't understand your question.
Used in the study to conduct the study?
I'm sorry, your audio cut out again.
My apologies. Within this limited information you had as an intern, did that information include the methodologies used within the LUSH studies?
Well, I don't believe I talk about the methodologies used in my witness statement. Would you still like me to answer the question?
Sure, if you can.
I mean, I didn't conduct the entire study myself. I only conducted part of that study.
Okay, that'll be on all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Ms. Kidder, any redirects?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, when you began working for Terra's Greenery, were you aware that you were breaking any contract with Lush Fertilizer?
No, I was not.
And was your data that you collected while researching for this study represented in the final results of the second study that Lush Fertilizer conducted?
I don't believe it was. I believe that they kept out some of the research done in order to bring a conclusion that looked good for the company.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Duran, any recross?
Yes, a brief recross. Ms. Durst, at the time, do you believe that you were an intern at the company, correct, at the time of these studies?
At the time of the first study, I was an intern, but then after 3 months, I was not.
And in the studies conducted, would you say the majority of the colleagues that were conducting the study were interns, or were they seniors of the company?
I don't believe I talk about any of that, about what positions did what in my witness statement.
Okay, that's all, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Durst. You're excused. Ms. Peterson,
Yes, Your Honor.
how would you like to proceed?
The plaintiff calls Dakota Weirs.
Okay, you can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I have a brief time check before I begin?
Sure.
You have 8 minutes and 46 seconds remaining.
Thank you. Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name.
Good morning. My name is Dakota Weirs, and Weirs is spelled W-E-I-R-S.
Ms. Weirs, you are the plaintiff in this lawsuit. You are suing Lush Fertilizer for damages. Why?
Because using their fertilizer caused me to develop my non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
How has your cancer changed your life?
I used to be an active member in the community. I would volunteer at local homeless shelters by serving food, washing dishes, helping any way I could. I was a member of the National Honor Society and president of my school. Now, I can't even help around my own house.
Has your life changed in other ways because of cancer?
Yes, the greatest joy in my life was my piano playing. My grandpa gave my parents a grand piano, and it just became my safe place where I would play with my toys, build forts. My grandpa taught me how to play, and soon I began to write my own songs. It was very sad when 13 years ago my grandpa died. The piano became my lifeline to him. It changed me for the better.
What do you mean by it changed you for the better?
I began to take lessons, and soon playing became my absolute life. I would spend all my spare time either practicing or studying musical theory. Soon I began to win competitions, and before I knew it, I had a full ride scholarship to Juilliard, the greatest musical conservatory in the world. My dreams came true.
Did you go to Juilliard?
No. Lush fertilizer has literally crushed this dream. Because of my non-Hodgkin lymphoma, I can't sit for long periods of time. In fact, this trial is very exhausting and painful for me. Not being able to play the piano is like losing my grandpa all over again.
How is your cancer caused?
It's caused by environmental conditions, including chemicals.
How has cancer affected you physically?
I have horrible swollen lymph nodes, frequent chills, chest pains, constant fatigue, I have shortness of breath, and I bruise easily.
Has cancer affected you emotionally?
Yes, I have terrible bouts of depression, and I'm in constant fear of dying.
Has cancer affected you in your ability to work?
Yes, despite how active I used to be in the community, I'd held a job since I was 14, putting myself through school. Now, I can barely even get off the couch.
Tell the jury about your work.
I worked for a locally owned landscaping company called Haven Landscaping. I just loved the feeling of the wind on my face and the dirt in my hands. It was so satisfying.
What did you do for Haven Landscaping?
I would spread seed and fertilizer because I was too young to work behind the heavy machinery like lawnmowers and weed whackers.
We believe that the defendant will try to convince the jury it was your own fault you developed your cancer because you didn't wear protective clothing at your work. How do you respond to that?
My boss told us to wear protective gear and a face covering when using chemicals, but he never even said why. And most of the time, it was way too hot to wear anything like that. It became excruciating to work in weather like that.
Were you ever warned that the fertilizer you were using could cause cancer?
No, but I wish I would have been.
You previously stated that you believe Lush fertilizer is the cause of your cancer. Could you briefly tell the jury about your progression with non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Before I left for Juilliard, I began to feel so sick all of the time. I had rapid weight loss, yet my abdomen would swell to twice its size. I had swollen lymph nodes, and I was almost always depressed. Soon, my doctors diagnosed me with non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Please continue.
We had no idea how someone my age, so young, could even get this terrible disease. But then one day I was sitting on the couch. I saw this news story that said Lush fertilizer knew its products could cause cancer, and they lied about it and they kept it a secret.
Did that news story cause you to do anything?
Yes, I remembered that I'd used Lush fertilizer in my job, and I immediately called my dad. I also called my old boss, who was able to get me a picture of an old Lush fertilizer packaging label.
Please look at Exhibit 1, which should appear on the screen in front of you. Just a moment, Ms. Weirs. Do you recognize Exhibit 1?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It is a picture of an old Lush fertilizer packaging label.
How do you know?
I worked with this label at my landscaping job, and this is what appeared on my phone when my boss sent it to me.
Is Exhibit 1 a fair and accurate copy of the old Lush fertilizer packaging label?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves for the admission of Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 will be admitted.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
You can publish.
Ms. Weirs, are there any warnings on this packaging label?
Yes, it says merely to It can cause eye irritation and to keep out of reach of children.
Does the packaging warn you about any carcinogenic properties?
No, but it should.
Now let's discuss your relationship with your twin, Skylar Weirs. We know that she will be testifying for the defendant. Were you raised together?
Yes, Skylar and I were in almost every activity together except my landscaping job because she's allergic to grass.
Did Skylar develop cancer as well?
No, she didn't.
Do you and Skylar have the same perspective when it comes to how the world works?
No, Skylar's into crazy things like UFOs, flat earth theory, and she's an anti-vaxxer. That's just not where I am in life.
Are you receiving any medical treatment?
Yes, I am.
Who is paying for your treatment?
My dad is.
Has your dad paying for your treatment caused any issues in your relationship with your twin?
Yes, sadly, Skylar is resentful of the fact that my dad is paying for my medical treatment because it will affect her inheritance.
Do you have an opinion on your twin's character for truthfulness?
Skylar isn't truthful at all, and to be honest, she'll write anything for the right price.
Finally, Ms. Weirs, do you know what the future holds for you?
No, and honestly, I am so scared. I have no idea if I'm going to live or die from this. My doctors don't even know what's going to happen to me. Hearing in this trial that I have a 72% chance that I'm going to even live 5 years is terrifying.
What are you asking of this jury?
Please don't let Lush do this to anyone else.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Dunn, Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Weirs. I want to thank you for coming and testifying today.
Good morning.
Now, on your direct examination, you mentioned that you work as a landscaper, yes?
Yes, I did.
And you worked as a landscaper for multiple years?
For 4.
And you worked, I'm correct in assuming you worked quite a lot, correct?
Well, I worked when a summer job whenever I could. I was very busy in the community.
You helped out on soccer fields?
Yes.
Resorts?
Yes, I worked many landscaping jobs, yes.
And you're too young to operate machinery, correct?
Of course.
So that meant that you consistently had the role of spreading seed and fertilizer?
Yes, just like a lot of other people my age.
And after working at these many locations for 4 years, wouldn't you agree that you had quite a bit of exposure to chemicals?
Especially Drufo.
Ms. Weirs, can you please refer to what has been marked as Exhibit 1? I'm going to ask my timekeeper to share screen. Now, Ms. Weirs, this is the Lush fertilizer label that you used, correct?
Yes, it is.
And have you read this before?
Yes, I have.
Do you mind reading the user safety recommendations on the label for me?
Sure. As with any spray fertilizer, utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin. Use of a respirator or a 95 mask is recommended. Follow manufacturer's instructions for cleaning/maintaining personal protective equipment, PPE.
Now, Ms. Weirs, have you read the user safety recommendations before?
I mean, I worked with them before. I'm sure I've read them, yes. But I mean, just because you work with a product doesn't mean you read it every time you use it.
But you've read it before, at least once.
Of course.
And did you wear a mask?
Not all the time. Sometimes I did, but sometimes I didn't.
And did you wear long clothing consistently?
Not consistently, but again, sometimes I did and sometimes I didn't.
And did you exclusively work with this product outdoors?
No, I didn't.
No further questions.
I just did whatever my boss told me to do.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Peterson, any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, would you have done anything different if you were warned that Drufo could cause cancer?
If I knew Drufo could cause cancer, I would never have worked with it, ever.
And were you ever told why you should wear this protective equipment?
Not once.
Thank you, Ms. Weirs. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Dunn, any recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Weirs, I just want to clarify, you read this safety label before
That's what I said, yes.
and you did not follow the instructions on this safety label,
I did sometimes.
but not consistently.
No, just like everyone else.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from the plaintiff?
The plaintiff rests, Your Honor.
Let's see. Then we have. I gotta get my list here. Sorry. Let's see. Is it Ms. Dunn? Are you calling your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. How would the defense like to proceed?
The defense would like to call Skylar Weirs to the stand.
Ms. Peterson, are you on cross? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
You can proceed, Ms. Dunn.
Ms. Weirs, please state your name, spelling your last name for the court record.
Skylar Weirs, Weirs.
Now, Ms. Weirs, how do you know the plaintiff in today's trial?
She's my fraternal twin.
And how do you feel about your twin's diagnosis?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Ms. Dunn.
I'm establishing character, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Would you like me to restate the question, Ms. Weirs?
Yes.
How do you feel about your twin's diagnosis today?
This is horrible. I mean, having my own twin sister be diagnosed with cancer, I mean, it's the worst thing could possibly happen to a family.
Now, I want to talk about you for a moment. What do you do, Ms. Weirs?
I'm a journalist. I work for Rationalist Magazine.
Can you tell me what Rationalist Magazine is?
They're a quarterly magazine that works against science skepticism.
And what do you write for Rationalist Magazine?
I write about agrotech.
And can you talk about the research involved with writing about agrotech?
Oh, of course. Well, this is actually a quite fascinating area. I had to specifically go to the United States Department of Agriculture and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture to find a lot of this information. Now, the information specifically goes over GMOs, pesticides, and herbicides. Now, to go in depth for this, I had to speak with scientists and find the original studies that was all about this stuff.
And in doing this research, what did you find about agrotech and Drufo specifically?
Well, that's even more interesting. I found there was a direct link with nitrogen and how nitrogen can affect the earth in major ways. Having too much of
Objection, Your Honor. Outside of the scope of expertise, Ms. Weirs has not been admitted as an expert yet and therefore cannot give expert testimony.
It's done.
I'm currently in a line of questioning that will establish Ms. Weirs as an expert.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
The plaintiff does not object if you are going through the research Ms. Weirs went into finding this information, but we do object if you bring up the information she did discover.
The objection is sustained. You can, if you want to talk about her qualifications and qualifier, then that's permitted. But asking her what the information revealed is beyond qualification for the expert.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Weirs, do you believe that your experience in this field is valuable to the court today?
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I tenor this witness as an expert in the field of agrotech.
Ms. Peterson, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. In your pretrial rulings, you ordered that Ms. Weirs may be admitted as an expert if they lay the foundation that she reviewed publications written by agrotech companies and research studies referenced by those publications, which the defendant has failed to do.
Ms. Dunn?
According to Rule of Evidence 702, which is the law and therefore overrides the pretrial motion, she's not required to hold a specific degree and also only needs to qualify as an expert in one of the 5 categories: training, education, experience, knowledge, or skill. And as we've established, this expert qualifies in the category of knowledge.
I think you need to flesh that out a little bit more. I think on the pretrial order requires that there be some proof of the activities that she reviewed, the documents that she reviewed, and I think you've hit on the USDA and some publications, but I think you need to flesh that out just a little bit more.
Okay, Your Honor, thank you. Ms. Weirs, can you please elaborate on the research that you did regarding Agritech and Drufo?
Yes, of course I can. As long as went to the USDA and the NSDA, I also went to specific scientists who did some research about Drufo, finding about how nitrogens are linked to carcinogens.
Your Honor, this time I now tenor this witness as an expert in the field of Agritech.
Ms. Peterson?
Your Honor, the defense has still failed to say that Ms. Weirs researched the publications written by Agritech companies.
I believe this was previously mentioned by my witness.
I believe so. The objection's overruled. I'm going to, Ms. Weirs will be qualified as an expert based on the pretrial order. You can proceed, Ms. Dunn.
Ms. Weirs, let me re-ask my previous question. What did you find in this research about Drufo specifically?
Well, as I was saying, it's an interesting topic that could go on for quite a while, about how nitrogens have some link to cancer, but not
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope of expertise, Ms. Weirs is an expert in Agritech, and she cannot testify to any medical diseases.
Done.
I believe we're discussing the implications of Drufo, which is involved in the agritech industry, and she has just been qualified as an expert in the field of agritech and therefore can testify on behalf of the implications of Drufo.
Okay, objection's overruled.
Ms. Weirs, would you like me to re-ask the question?
No, as I was saying, there is some link to cancer, but most of the links are just if there's an abundance of nitrogen in the system, you can have many problems to the earth, including having dead zones in the ocean and causing blue baby syndrome to having a bad heart.
And what are some of the downsides to using products that don't contain Drufo?
Now, they don't bond to the grass as well, which allows the nitrogens to get off of them and go make these abundances. So with Drufo allows the bondage of the nitrogen to the grass, which also makes your grass greener.
And in your expert opinion, do you believe that Lush fertilizer is safe?
I do.
And would you trust Lush fertilizer?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Peterson, cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Weirs. I have several questions for you as well. On your direct examination, you mentioned that you talked with various scientists about Agritech. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, I do.
But in your witness statement, you never mentioned talking with specific scientists, do you?
I thought it wasn't needed to be mentioned, so because I did state that I went to the USDA and the NSDA about specific researches that they found.
But Ms. Weirs, my question was simply, you did not speak with certain scientists, did you?
I did speak with certain scientists.
Now let's discuss your background and experience. You are 20 years old?
Yes.
And your only qualification to testify to this jury is that you spent time researching publications, correct?
I also have a knowledge.
Ms. Weirs, when you were admitted as an expert, it was for your research, correct?
It was for my research and knowledge of it, yes.
The knowledge that you accumulated from your research, correct?
Yes, which is still knowledge.
Unlike our expert, Dr. Rogers, you never ran any tests on Drufo, did you?
But no, I did not run tests, but I talked to scientists who did.
Unlike our expert, Dr. Rogers, you didn't use a mass spectrometer to study the chemical composition of Drufo.
No, but I also talked to scientists who did.
And unlike our expert, Dr. Rogers, you don't have a bachelor's degree, a master's, or a PhD, do you?
No, but I have a general knowledge, and if you have a general knowledge, you can basically do everything. You don't need those fancy degrees to say what I'm qualified for.
And you don't have any professional work experience outside of freelance writing for an advocacy magazine, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really freelancing. I work for them. I am a journalist for them.
You believe that outside of the USDA and the NASDA, no one in the whole world has the overall perspective you do on agritech, correct?
Not no one in the whole world. I mean, the world's quite big. There's other people who have the same aspect as me.
Ms. Weers, please look at your witness statement, which should be on the screen in front of you in just a moment. And turning to the last page, that is your signature, isn't it?
It is.
And above you state, I have carefully reviewed this statement. It is true and accurate. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Now turning to lines 16 through 17, you state that outside of the USDA and the NASDA, I doubt anyone has the overall perspective on modern agritech that I do. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
But you have never worked in agritech, have you?
No, but I have done research even before my essential research started.
In fact, you currently work at Applebee's as a part-time server, right?
Yes, but anytime that I'm not working at Applebee's, I stay up researching.
You did hear Dr. Rogers' testimony in court today that people with a prolonged exposure to Drufo have a 1,000% greater risk of cancer, correct?
Yes, I feel like that's a hyperbole though.
With all of your research, you have stated that you are unaware of any study that shows a causal link between Drufo and cancer, correct?
Yes.
This means that somehow, with all of your research, you missed Dr. Rogers' study, doesn't it?
I did not miss Dr. Rogers' study. It was unconclusive.
Ms. Weers, you never mentioned Dr. Rogers' study in your witness statement, do you?
No, because it's unconclusive and not finalized.
Now let's discuss your current situation. You are testifying as a specially retained expert in this case, aren't you?
I am.
And this means that Lush Fertilizer hired you to testify for them, right?
No.
Ms. Weers, being a specially retained expert does mean that the defendant did hire you, correct?
Technically, but I don't get paid. I do this off of my own research and freelance journaling.
Ms. Weers, specially retained experts do get paid.
I had no idea. I do not get paid in this. I have no financial benefit from testifying today.
By your own admission, you have financial issues in your life, don't you?
I do.
And you have accumulated a lot of debt because of gambling,
Objection,
correct?
relevancy.
Ms.
May I
Peterson?
respond? Your Honor, this goes to the motive of Ms. Weers for testifying as an expert today, and motive is always at issue.
Objections overruled. You can answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let me ask that question again. You have accumulated a lot of debt because of gambling, correct?
Not a lot of debt, a small amount of debt.
But in fact, you are in a financial hole that you have yet to climb out of, aren't you?
It's a small hole though.
But you are in a financial hole.
Yes.
And on top of those financial pressures, your father cut you off from any financial assistance, didn't he?
He did, but it was to pay for my sister's medical bills, and it's better for my sister to get her medical bills paid than mine own.
And you and Dakota are the only heirs of your father, correct?
Sure, you could say that.
In your own words, you don't have a very close relationship with your twin, do you?
Unfortunately, no, the cancer has pushed us apart, but I do love my sister though.
Now let's discuss Drufo. You do agree that Drufo is potentially harmful for humans, don't you?
No.
Well, let's explore your answer. In your own words, there are inherent risks from modern agricultural products, aren't there?
Everything has a risk, even your daily household products.
In fact, there's never going to be a fertilizer that is truly safe.
Yes, I think Drufo has the same amount of risks as your daily average fertilizer.
And Drufo is a pesticide, isn't it?
Yes.
And pesticides are, by definition, poison, correct?
You could say that, but when you eat strawberries, are you afraid the pesticides will hurt you?
Ms. Weers, I am doing the cross-examination and I have to ask the questions here, but if you would like to discuss these topics with your direct examining attorney, on your redirect, you may. So pesticides are poison, correct?
You could say that.
So you do agree that Drufo is potentially harmful for humans, right?
No, I mean, you can label something as a poison, but not be harmful
But
for humans.
Ms. Weers, you did say that there are inherent risks for modern agricultural products, correct?
Yes, in every
And that would
agricultural
include Drufo.
product.
Hold on. Ms. Peterson, you have to allow her to complete her answer without talking
Yes, Your
over her.
Honor.
And
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Weers, wait for her to complete her question before you answer the question. Go ahead, Ms. Peterson.
Yes, Your Honor. You cannot testify today that Drufo does not cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, can you?
I never said that it does. So I'm not testifying. I'm testifying that it doesn't cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There's no risk towards it. I mean, every fertilizer has a risk, and this is just has a risk too. So it's just as safe as any other fertilizer.
Ms. Weers, the best you can say is that from your perspective, the evidence on Drufo causing non-Hodgkin lymphoma is inconclusive, correct?
No, I can say it's little to none.
It is inconclusive. Those were your words in your witness statement, correct?
Yes, I said that in my witness statement, but that still means little to none.
Finally, Ms. Weers, it is true that you grew up with Dakota Weers, correct?
Yes, we're twins, so why wouldn't I?
But you, unlike your twin, never worked with Drufo, correct?
I'm sorry, Drufo is a chemical, so I wouldn't technically work with it. It's in a fertilizer, but I never technically worked with the fertilizer till I was much older.
You never worked with Lush fertilizer, did you?
I did, but I was much older when I started to work with it.
Ms. Weers, in your witness statement, you never mentioned working with Drufo or Lush fertilizer, do you?
But if I'm talking about it, then you have to expect that I'm working with it because it is in my witness statement and I worked with it when I was much older.
Ms. Weers, I assure you it is not in your witness statement.
I know I never put it in my witness statement, but I mean, I'm literally writing about Drufo in my own journalism. And so to be fair, I had to work with it.
Ms. Weers, you don't have non-Hodgkin lymphoma, do you?
No, but my sister does.
No further questions, Your Honor.
It's done. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Weers. So, Mr. Duran?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go
We would like. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
We would like to call Miss Doncourt to the stand.
Okay.
Hello, Miss Doncourt. Can you please state your full?
You can proceed, Mr. Duran.
Can you please state your full name and spell your last name for the court?
Hi, my name is Blake Doncourt. That's Doncourt.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, Miss Doncourt?
Well, I'm the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, my own company, and I have been since 2003.
Can you tell me a little bit about Lush Fertilizer?
Well, we produce long products, but we're also very environmentally friendly. We donate 10% of our profits to charities that help reduce our global nitrogen footprint, and we also host our own education programs and charities that help clean the world's most polluted oceans.
And what's inside Lush Fertilizer products?
A chemical compound we call Drufo.
Can you tell me a little bit about Drufo?
Well, Drufo is a patented bonding agent in our fertilizer that keeps it preserved, intact, and produces your luscious green grass.
How many times did Lush test Drufo?
Twice.
Did anybody else test Drufo?
The Environmental Protection Agency did, and no concerns were raised.
And what did you find through all these tests?
We found that the risk of Drufo being dangerous is statistically insignificant.
Okay. And let's talk about baking. Does Lush bake its products?
We don't.
Did your test results warrant any need for baking your products?
By federal standards, no.
Okay. I want to move on to Carson Durst. What can you tell me what your relationship was like?
Well, Carson was like a kid to me, They were best friends with my son, Charles. I would take them up to the lake house in the summers, and I would even drive them to their soccer games.
What was their role in your company?
They're an intern for our research and development team.
Can you tell me about their layoff?
We found Carson to be underperforming and therefore thought it was best to drop him from the company.
And what did Ms. Durst do after their layoff?
Well, they worked for Terra's Greenery, our competing company, and that completely violated our non-compete agreement.
What was that non-compete agreement?
It stated that Carson cannot work for a competing company for the span of at least 2 years.
So they didn't keep their word.
Not at all.
Would you consider Carson to be Ms. Durst to be a trustworthy person?
Not anymore.
Let's talk about Dr. Casey Rogers for a moment. What do you know about Dr. Rogers?
Well, first of all, I know he's being paid for this litigation. And second of all, they claim to have done some sort of study on how Drufo is carcinogenic, but that study was never published nor peer-reviewed.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion by a lay witness. This witness is not an expert. I cannot render an opinion on our expert's research.
Mr. Duran?
May I respond?
Yes.
Yes. What Ms. Doncourt is saying is basic knowledge we have already heard in this court today. It's not an expert opinion. She has merely done her own research. She's found what the basic knowledge of the basic juror could find and has heard in this case. So it is not an opinion by expert.
The objection is sustained to the extent that Ms. Doncourt is giving any opinions, but she can't testify to things within her personal knowledge. So if she can't give opinions about the veracity or the expertise of the opposing expert, unless it's something that is within her personal knowledge. So you can go ahead, but she can't give opinions about can't offer expert opinions. So
Okay.
Go ahead and.
Let me rephrase the question. What is your opinion about Dr. Rogers in this courtroom today?
Well,
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion by a lay witness. This witness cannot testify as to Dr. Rogers' research.
Ms. Kidder, I'm going to ask you just to state the basis of the objection, and if I need further information, I'll ask for it, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
The objection is sustained. She's not entitled to give opinions on you're getting into expert testimony, Mr. Duran.
Apologies. Let me just withdraw the question and move on. Let's talk about Dakota Weirs for a moment. Can you tell me your knowledge about Dakota Weirs?
Well, to my knowledge, Ms. Weirs was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I understand that's not genetic.
And how do you feel about Ms. Weirs?
God, I feel
Objection,
terrible
Your Honor.
for her.
Relevance?
Overruled.
Let me repeat the question. How do you feel about Ms. Weirs?
I feel terrible for her. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what it's like being robbed of so many opportunities, especially at her age. And I mean, as one of my clients, I really feel for her, and I understand that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is not a joke, and that's why our company takes the necessary precautions in order to prevent this.
And is there anything else you would like to state about your company in this case today, Ms. Doncourt?
As an avowed environmentalist and humanist, I would never put a product on the line that could be potentially dangerous to other people or to the environment.
Thank you, Ms. Doncourt. Thank you, Your Honor. That is all.
Ms. Kidder, cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Doncourt. I have several questions for you as well. Let's begin with your profits. Since founding Lush Fertilizer, you have worked night and day to make Lush the profitable business it is today, haven't you?
I did.
And you do not bake any of your products because you believe baking costs too much. Isn't that right?
Well, it's not financial motivation, and I do find it bold of you to assume that.
Ms. Doncourt, you do believe baking costs too much, don't you? I'm using your own words.
It does, but it's not a motivation.
In fact, you were so focused on the cost of baking that you created an extensive spreadsheet addressing the cost both with and without baking, didn't you?
Well, every company creates spreadsheets that regards their profits.
And that is Exhibit 8 in this trial?
It is.
Please look at Exhibit 8, which should be on the screen in front of you. You recognize this exhibit, don't you?
I do.
This is the spreadsheet you created?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a fair and accurate copy of that spreadsheet?
It is.
Your Honor, the plaintiff moves for the admission of Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection, Mr. Duran?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 8 will be admitted.
Permission to publish.
You may publish.
You were so focused on the cost of baking because you wanted to ensure that the capitalists who helped found your company got a good return on their investment, didn't you?
I was just simply making a table like every other company.
But you did need to ensure that they got a good return on their investment, didn't you?
I was literally just making a table for our profits.
And not
There
only
was
did
no
the
motivation
company
behind it.
not only did the company need to closely watch profits, but you yourself have faced several financial pressures, haven't you?
I have, like everyone else.
And some of those pressures are based on a very large award that the divorce court gave to your ex-spouse. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Now let's talk about your knowledge of the dangers of Drufo. You are aware that Carson Durst produced an email in court today that showed potential carcinogenic qualities identified in samples of Drufo, aren't you?
I'm familiar with it.
Didn't you call Ms. Durst a regrettable disappointment?
I mean, yes.
And your name is on the recipient list that email Ms. Durst showed us, right?
It is.
But you claim to have never received this email that Ms. Durst showed us.
I didn't do that.
You never claimed to not receive that email?
I don't believe so. Which email?
Exhibit 4.
Okay. Well, yes, that was fabricated.
So since you assert that that email was fabricated, you also then assert that there is absolutely no risk to using your product whatsoever. Isn't that right?
There isn't.
Please look at your witness statement, which should be on the screen in front of you in just a moment. This is your witness statement, isn't it?
It is.
And that is your signature at the bottom of the page?
That's right.
And right above your signature, you state, "I have carefully reviewed this statement. It is true and accurate." Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Now, please look at lines 28 through 30. And on those lines, you state, "Our toxicology and research development team found nothing in the product, nor apparently did the EPA, to require a warning with the insignificant levels of toxicity in our fertilizer." Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Now, please turn to lines 74 and 75 of your witness statement, on which you state, "Those are the same reports that were provided to me that said there were no significant cancer danger." Did I read that correctly?
You did.
And now please turn to lines 109 and 110 of your witness statement, on which you state, "While baking the fertilizer would remove any risk that our fertilizer was carcinogenic, the baking process was just too expensive." Did I read that correctly?
You did.
You had the ability to completely eliminate all possibility that your product was carcinogenic, didn't you?
I did, but there was no need to.
And you chose not to do that, didn't you?
I did.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Duran, redirect.
Yes, a brief redirect, Your Honor. How many tests did Lush do on Drufo?
Objection,
2.
Your Honor. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
Okay. What? So in your research, did you find there was any need to bake your products?
We didn't.
Okay. And with that research of finding that you did not need to bake your products, did it warrant any need to further your payment to baking these products?
It didn't.
Okay. That's all. Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Kidder, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sachs, am I correct?
Yes.
How would the defense like to proceed?
We now call Dr. Devin Williams to the stand. Hello, Dr. Williams. Can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Dr. Devin Williams. That's Williams.
So could you tell us about your educational background?
Sure. I completed my undergrad through PhD at Colorado State University in Fort Collins. And I also did a specialized post-PhD program at the University of Utah in pharmacotoxicology.
And what about your professional background?
Well, Currently, I lead the research and development labs for Lush Fertilizer, but I also teach 4 courses at the University of New Mexico.
And how long have you been at that job with Lush?
Well, I've led the labs for about 7 years.
Okay, at this time, I would like to ask you to turn to Exhibit 9, which should be screen shared shortly. In this exhibit, do you recognize it?
I do.
And what is it?
It's my resume.
Is it an accurate representation of what you've said today regarding your education and previous work experience?
It is.
I would now like to move Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, I object to hearsay.
Ms. Sachs?
Exhibit 9 is a resume, it is a foundational object, and plus the person who made this document is sitting right here and can be questioned about all the information that is on this document in cross.
Response, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Since the person who created this document is here in court today, the court prefers live testimony.
The document is a hearsay document, and the witness can testify to the contents of the document, but the document's not going to be admitted.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Williams, do you have any publications or research?
I do. I have 6 of them.
Could you elaborate on these publications and research?
Well, all 6 of my publications have been peer-reviewed, and I go over numerous amounts of chemicals, research that I've done on rats, and it's all on toxins and how toxic all of the chemicals are.
And do you have any certifications in toxicology?
I do. I have certifications in Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah.
Okay, thank you. And do you believe that your testimony will be helpful in assisting the judge or jury understand the facts of this case?
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I would now like to tender this witness as an expert in the fields of toxicology and pharmacotoxicology.
Ms. Fan, any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, the witness will be admitted in the fields of toxicology and pharmacotoxicology.
Thank you. So, Dr. Williams, what did you do at Lush Fertilizer?
Well, I started as the technician in the DRUFO development team, but then I got promoted to later lead the labs and really oversee environmental balances, but more specifically oversee environmental balances of DRUFO.
Okay, so can you tell us more about the company's priorities at Lush for the development of DRUFO?
Specifically for DRUFO, we want this groundbreaking chemical to be environmentally friendly and cost effective.
And do you believe that DRUFO is safe for humans to use?
Yes, I do. It has not been proven to have any statistically significant increases in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in humans.
But what about the plaintiff's claims saying that DRUFO is carcinogenic in rats?
While some parts of both of our immune systems are somewhat similar, we can't always trust these studies done on animals. Let's take the chemical Accutane. It causes birth defects in newborn babies, but when we used Accutane on rats and mice, it had no effects in them. So the studies that we do on animals can't really guarantee anything.
So is there any overlap between the immune systems in rats and humans?
Yes, there are some similarities, but not everything is the same.
So since there are some similarities, how can we be sure that something is carcinogenic in rats, but is not also carcinogenic in humans?
This is really hard to determine, especially since testing chemicals on humans is highly unethical. But when we are testing carcinogens, we start by putting them in animals with high dosages just to make sure that we do get a reaction from these animals. To do this, we don't really need many animals, we just need a couple of them. And during these tests, scientists will typically assume that something is carcinogenic in one animal when the exposure doesn't really have the same increase in humans. But all we can do for this is to put a detailed safety label on our products, which Lush does.
And so earlier you said that there is not a statistically significant increase, but does this mean that there is at least some risk when using Drufo?
Yeah, of course. There's always going to be a risk whether you use Drufo or you don't use Drufo. Say you take a sample of people, like 100 people, and you split that group in half, 50-50. You have people that use Drufo and have people that use other fertilizers that don't use Drufo. Eventually, both of these groups are going to have people that do develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But I would like to reiterate that Drufo does not cause a statistically significant increase in the risk of getting cancer than any other fertilizer.
All right, so let's focus on the potential toxicity of Drufo. What did you find?
To really understand Drufo, you have to understand past and other fertilizers. You see, past fertilizers, you have to use them constantly, and when it rains, it creates a lot of runoff that goes into our water streams, which is really harmful to our environment. Drufo actually binds to these plants, and when it rains, it creates less water runoff, and you don't have to use Drufo as often, so it really is environmentally friendly for us.
And is Drufo banned anywhere?
It is. It's banned in the European Union.
And why is that?
Well, this ban is not based on concerns over cancer risks. In fact, the EU bureaucracy chose to prohibit Drufo, which reduces nitrates in nature, because it doesn't do the same thing under their abstract laboratory conditions.
And did Lush do anything about the EU's decision?
Theoretically, we probably could have done something, but we were a new company and we didn't have a lot of money, so it really wasn't fair to us.
So in your studies, what other fertilizers did you compare Drufo to?
I compared Drufo to fertilizers that didn't even have Drufo in them, which it's important to have it's important to do so because you do need to see the results that have Drufo in them and don't have Drufo in them, which frankly Dr. Rogers doesn't do.
Well, do you know what methodologies he did use?
Well, from the little knowledge that I have of his study, since it wasn't peer-reviewed and it wasn't replicated, he took farmers and gardeners to normal people that aren't really in that same environment as they are, but he really only focused on those people that use Drufo. He really didn't have a base group where he could see that there might be a correlation. In fact, he used that there is a possibility.
Objection, Your Honor, narrative.
Overruled. You can continue.
Dr. Rogers used that there is a possibility that Drufo can lead to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He specifically did not use a probability.
And is this your only problem with Dr. Casey Rogers' study?
No, as I said before, I work with a whole bunch of experts, and none of us has found his study peer-reviewed or replicated, which makes no sense to me, really, because anything in science can happen once, but for it to be done over and over again, that's really science.
And what is your final stance on the use of Drufo?
Drufo is a revolutionary product, and although this is an unfortunate case, I wish that we weren't looking at Drufo through a vacuum lens, but we were looking at it for all of its aspects that it has in nature, and I feel like we won't be able to get that throughout this case.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Fan Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Williams. I'd like to address something you said in your direct. You mentioned that testing on mice and rats is not always accurate. Do you remember this testimony?
I do.
Dr. Williams, That is nowhere in your witness statement, is it?
It is not.
Furthermore, you are the Director of Toxicology Research and Development at Lush, correct?
I am.
That means it's your department that tries to make sure Drufo isn't toxic, correct?
Correct.
And you have, in your own words, the inherent responsibility to consider the why and if about Lush's products, don't you?
Correct.
However, if this jury were to find that Drufo causes cancer, that means it's you and your department that made a mistake. Isn't that true?
If they do find that Drufo can cause cancer, it would be on me. But like I said, there hasn't been any statistically significant increases that Drufo does so.
But you have a lot at risk in this trial, don't you?
I believe that all of us here have some sort of risk.
Furthermore, you have, in your own words, a bias in the outcome of this case, don't you?
Sure, I do, but I also know that your expert witness does more significantly than I do.
But you have a bias in the outcome of this case.
As do your own witnesses.
Dr. Williams, I just need a yes or no answer to my question. You have a bias in the outcome of this case, don't you?
Somewhat, yes.
Now let's talk about what other nations are doing with Drufo. The European Union has banned Drufo, hasn't it?
Yes, but not over concerns of cancer risks.
It's about nitrates, isn't it?
Yes.
In fact, the European Union determined that Drufo contributes more than incidental nitrate accumulation, correct?
In their lab tests, yes, but not in nature.
But then it's not so environmentally perfect, is it?
For their lab tests, I guess you could say that it's not. But what really happens in the real world, that's where you can account it for.
Now, this ban on Drufo, it extends to many nations outside the European Union, doesn't it?
It does.
And your company hopes to get that ban reversed, correct?
We do.
In fact, your company is creating a brand new study on Drufo that you hope will change the EU's mind, isn't it?
Yes, I am.
However, if your company were to lose this trial, that would hurt your company's chances of getting the EU to change its mind, wouldn't it?
Yes, of course it would.
Now, your company is creating this study because you believe the EU should not have banned Drufo, correct?
Correct.
Therefore, you believe the EU was wrong, don't you?
Yes, I do believe they were wrong.
So you will agree with me that sometimes regulatory agencies make the wrong decision, don't they?
I mean, sometimes they do.
Now let's talk about your involvement with Drufo. Lush's CEO, Blake Doncourt, told you to keep Drufo products cost-effective. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And you don't have any reason to disagree that if Lush Fertilizer had baked Drufo, all risk of cancer would have been eliminated.
Sure, but I was told that baking our products would be simply overkill.
And you do know that Ms. Doncourt refused to bake Drufo to keep the costs down, don't you?
What Ms. Doncourt does on her own time has nothing to do with me.
Finally, Dr. Williams, you cannot tell this jury that Drufo doesn't cause cancer, can you?
I can tell the jury that there has been no statistically significant increases that Drufo causes cancer in humans.
Dr. Williams, you did not answer my question. My question was, you cannot tell this jury that Drufo doesn't cause cancer, can you?
I cannot say that for sure.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Sachs, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Dr. Williams, what was the EU's worries about when banning Drufo?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Overrule.
I'll restate my question. What was the EU's worries about when banning Drufo?
Well, when they decided to ban Drufo, they had to do many lab tests and put Drufo with the right chemicals and other bacteria to see that it did have the same nitrates as other fertilizers do that don't involve Drufo. But those are in lab tests, and they really didn't account for how Drufo works in the real world.
Did these concerns have anything to do with cancer?
No, not at all.
And also, what would it mean for your company if your study went through in Europe?
It would mean that we get to sell all of our products that use Drufo to the EU, which would be amazing.
And why would it be amazing?
Because Drufo is such a revolutionary and groundbreaking chemical that not only does the US deserve to have it, but many other countries do as well.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Ms. Fan, any recross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Dr. Williams, Lush Fertilizer is currently selling products in the EU, isn't it?
Yes, we are.
And these products don't contain Drufo, do they?
No, they don't.
And they are just as effective, aren't they?
I would not say that, no.
Yet they are still being sold in the EU, correct?
Yes, because they banned Drufo and we respect their decisions.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. The defense rests.
Okay. Move to closing statements. And Ms. Dunn, are you giving the closing for the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, I am.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong sheet. Ms. Kidder is giving the closing statement for the plaintiff.
Your Honor, before I begin, I would like to reserve any of my remaining time for rebuttal.
That's fine.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. That is what we have proven. The defendant put on the facade of being a good corporate citizen, holding itself out as an environmentalist and a philanthropist. But as you have seen, Lush's true identity is that of a corporation that sacrificed safety for profit. Good morning, members of the jury. My name is Rachel Kidder, and I have the privilege of representing Ms. Weirs, a talented young pianist whose life has been destroyed by the negligence of Lush Fertilizer. We believe you will agree it is more likely than not that Lush Fertilizer was the cause of Ms. Weirs' non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Let's take a look at the jury instructions. Instruction number 2 states that in order for you to find for Ms. Weirs, you must first find the following. 1, Lush manufactured a product containing a chemical compound known as Drufo. All witnesses in this case agree on that. 2, Lush Fertilizer failed to exercise reasonable care to prevent Drufo from creating a risk of harm. You heard all the evidence, especially the Langley email and Lush's own internal studies that proves Lush management knew about the dangers of Drufo. Carson Durst, who was employed by Lush, testified that when they found out Drufo causes cancer, they tried to bury that information. And 3, we must prove that Ms. Weirs has damages. Members of the jury, Drufo has devastated her life. We have proven negligence under jury instruction number 2. Next, let's look at jury instruction number 3, which is the definition of negligence. This instruction states we first must prove use of Drufo may be harmful. Again, you heard all the evidence, as well as our own expert testify to prove this very fact. Second, this instruction states that if that risk of harm is not obvious to a reasonable user, then the manufacturer must warn the user of the risk of harm. It is undisputed that Lush did not warn Ms. Weirs of that harm that they and they alone knew about. In fact, they failed to warn anyone. The connection between Drufo and cancer is so strong, the only thing the defendant can do is try to blame Ms. Weirs for using its own product. Do you hear how absurd that sounds? Yes, we agree Ms. Weirs did not cover herself from head to foot when working with the fertilizer. The only thing the packaging said about wearing protective clothing was that not doing so could cause eye irritation. Members of the jury, if Lush knew about that harm and wanted to warn the public, why was there no warning to us about the risk of cancer? Let's talk about why. Lush called Blake Doncourt, the CEO and the person who decided not to make the fertilizer. Why would she not eliminate all risk of harm? Because it would have cut into her profits. And remember, she needed that money to pay for her alimony. What about Skylar Weirs? Ms. Weirs, who has the temerity to testify against her own sister, lives somewhere out in left field and has no credibility as an expert witness. And finally, even the respectable Dr. Williams was forced by Lush today to repeat their propaganda that they didn't know Drufo was harmful. Members of the jury, Dr. Williams' job was on the line today, and she was simply repeating the mantra that the internal studies and the statistical significance for people who have used Drufo meant nothing. Jury instruction number 14 states you may believe all, part, or none of the testimony of a witness. Every single one of the defense's witnesses lied to you today. Their testimony deserves no weight. I will ask in my rebuttal that you find in favor of Dakota Weirs. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn?
First, I want to thank you all for your time and attention throughout the trial today. There's no doubt that Dakota Weirs suffered a tragedy. It's horrific to see this young pianist watch as her life derails. And I understand that she's looking for someone to blame. She wants to explain the unexplainable and try and find peace with her diagnosis. But attacking a company because they have deep pockets is not the solution. We do not need more tragedy than what has already occurred. But now, those supporting the plaintiff today are digging for it because they think there's a cash prize buried underneath. The plaintiff in today's trial must prove all of the following things with a preponderance of evidence, and as you will see, they failed to do so. The first is that my client was allegedly negligent by failing to exercise reasonable care to prevent our product from causing harm. But Lush has only ever been concerned with the safety of our users. As you heard from Blake Doncourt today, not one, but 2 in-house studies were conducted on the safety of Drufo and found that there was no connection between Drufo and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the plaintiff tried to tell you today that these studies are a point of concern. But is it unreasonable for a company to double check the safety of its own product, especially when that product is a chemical? Absolutely not. Even so, as you saw from Exhibit 1 today, Lush Fertilizer still placed a warning label on their product, advising all users to wear the appropriate protective gear. And it was a warning label that was ultimately ignored by the plaintiff. Now, for those of you who've never taken a statistics course, one of the first crucial lessons you learn is that you cannot determine causation from an observational study. Dr. Casey Rogers, another witness who testified on the plaintiff's behalf today, undoubtedly spends her time undergoing important research. But her observational study on Drufo could only go so far as determined, and to quote her, a mere correlation between Drufo and cancer. Another crucial lesson you learn in a statistics class: correlation cannot and will not ever guarantee causation. Any researcher, even Dr. Casey Rogers herself, understands that she cannot claim from her own study that Drufo is the cause of this cancer. She proved nothing. Perhaps this is the reason the study wasn't even ever peer-reviewed or replicated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this mere speculation does not do well to qualify as preponderance of the evidence. Now, additionally, the plaintiff must also prove that they had damages specifically caused by the defendant. Now, today, the plaintiff testified that she spent many years working for a landscaping company, and that because of her age, she worked primarily with fertilizers because she couldn't operate machinery. Essentially, she was exposed to a variety of chemicals for an extended period of time. And these variety of chemicals had every chance to infect Miss Weirs because she failed time and time again to protect herself. She did not wear gloves. She did not wear a mask. She did not wear long clothing to protect her skin. Now, as for Carson Durst, another witness you heard from today on Miss Weirs' behalf, well, she seems to be in the habit of breaking contracts, specifically that of non-compete agreements, as you've seen from Exhibit 5. If she could not be trusted to follow simple instructions of a contract, how could she be trusted to diagnose the source of the plaintiff's cancer? She is simply a woman working for a competing fertilizer company who has now latched onto Dakota Weirs' vulnerability and using it as a petty excuse to leech cash from Lush Fertilizer. You heard the testimony of Blake Doncourt. Lush Fertilizer is a company that protects, not harms. And Dakota Weirs, though we regard her diagnosis with sorrow, is being used like a paper map on a treasure hunt for whatever wealth my client may have. The plaintiff has failed to put forth a preponderance of evidence suggesting that Drufo has a direct link to cancer, and their claims of our negligence are fruitless. Fruitless when the science is false, fruitless when the research is incomplete, and fruitless when Ms. Weirs had the opportunity to be safe and she did not take it. For these reasons, we ask the jury to return a verdict in favor of the defendant. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn. Ms. Kidder?
Your Honor, before I begin, can I have a time check?
Can the timekeeper please show? I think it's somewhere around 2 minutes, but I'm not sure.
You have a minute, 25 seconds left.
Minute 25.
Explain the unexplainable, members of the jury. That was opposing counsel's theme today. Explain the unexplainable. But non-Hodgkin lymphoma is not unexplainable, members of the jury. It's science. And this science showed that Lush Fertilizer was negligent, that their product did cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma. In Ms. Sachs' opening statement, she said that Ms. Weirs had no logical conclusion but to point the finger at Lush Fertilizer. And she is exactly right, members of the jury. There was no logical conclusion other than following the science and the evidence. Now, Dr. Williams on cross-examination stated that lab tests are not reliable, members of the jury, when talking about her own product. Is it reasonable then to assume that the lab test was not reliable when she conducted it and concluded that there was no carcinogenicity to her product? Members of the jury, if she says that lab tests aren't reliable, then you can't trust what she said her tests produced. After you find for Ms. Weirs, we ask that you award her the damages she has proven. She asked for $5 million. No amount of money can change her condition because there is no cure. But she asks that you recognize the harm she has and will experience for the rest of her life. We trust you to do the right thing. Prove to Lush Fertilizer that they can never do this to anyone else, and find for Ms. Weirs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, panelists, if you can please complete your scoring.
I've submitted the form.
Thank you.
Same.
Okay.
Same here.
Great. Can everybody turn on their camera for a second? Do we have a few minutes? Elizabeth, do we have a few minutes?
Absolutely. Take as long as you'd like for feedback.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you all for your presentations. That was very impressive. I don't have many, I'm an administrative law judge for the state, and I can promise you I would welcome all of you into my court. I was very impressed with the way that one of the things that you see a lot in these sorts of, in any trial, is sort of the attorney's demeanor and the attorney's approach to cases. And I think you all did an excellent job in that regard. There was, to me, the most effective way of advocating and in any trial is to adopt sort of a conversational tone with the witnesses, as opposed to coming across as, reading off questions to them. And really, there was no one that didn't do that. You all, it was very, very well done. I mean, your command of the evidence and your command of the facts of this case, I thought was all very, very well done. I only had a couple of things that I saw through the hearing which is amazing to me, because in the hearings I do, I come up with a lot more things that the licensed attorneys would do differently. One, I would say, well, this is actually on the positive side. I wish that the attorneys that appeared in front of me were as good at eliciting an expert direct as you folks were. I thought that was really well done and very clearly done. The things that I picked up on from sitting here as a judge is a couple of things. One thing that came up a couple of times, when you have a difficult witness who's not responding to your question, it's best practice to not directly instruct the witness. So don't say to the witness, "You're not answering my question. Now my question is different." I mean, it's okay. It's okay to do it in some format. So, for example, "Thank you for that answer, but my question was a little bit different. Can you answer this question?" And if they persist on not answering the question, you need to ask the judge to instruct the witness to answer, as opposed to you instructing the witness to answer. It's sort of proper courtroom decorum and format, but it also doesn't, as the attorney, it doesn't make you look like a bully. You're asking the judge to be the bully, and I don't mind doing that. But really, I mean, I thought your folks' command of this was really good. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to offer. I thought that you were the attorneys in the case obviously grasped everything very well. I thought your presentation was very good. The one thing I would caution you, what's interesting is you were all better on cross than you were on direct, I felt like. And that's good. And that's because you're listening to the questions and you're listening to the answers and asking the questions, as opposed to reading off of a script, or not necessarily reading off the script, but your pre-decided questions. And direct is, and to some extent, doing a good direct is more difficult than doing a good cross. And I think that was what's really impressive on direct that you folks did, is you let your witnesses provide the information. There's too many attorneys. If any of you choose to go into the law, you will see that there are attorneys out there that really are waiting their turn to speak as opposed to listening. And I felt like you all did a pretty good job of that. And so on your directs, I thought that was good. You know, a lot of attorneys want to testify and just have their witness confirm that the attorney's right. But I thought that was all very well done. I mean, from a presentation standpoint, I don't really have any criticisms of anyone. I thought you guys were all really good in that regard. The only thing I would say is there was one line of questioning that I picked up on that was, I can't remember which witness was being questioned, but the preface of the question was like, unlike our expert, you said this. Unlike our expert, you said this. I don't know that I would lead with that type of an introduction. I would just ask them the question rather than sort of contrast your two witnesses in that with that sort of an intro. But other than that, I mean, that's a very small, fine point, but we're really sort of rearranging, really minuscule things. So again, thank you all. I'm very impressed, and thank you all for your participation in this. I can tell you've all put in a lot of hard work, and I was very impressed. So I'll turn it over to any of the panelists that want to comment.
Sure. I agree with all that you said, and I am blown away. I judged a college competition a few months ago, and you guys are at that level. So you guys really, really put in a lot of work, and I appreciate that. Things that I noticed that were particularly good was that both sides were very good about not doing frivolous objections. So I think all of your objections were really thought out, and I appreciate that. I also just have a suggestion as far as maybe helping with cross. Perhaps consider tailoring your questions a little more narrowly so that you can get the response you're looking for. Sometimes it can be as simple as saying like yes or no, or can you please answer yes, no, something like that, so that you can kind of steer them and point them in the direction you want. Easier said than done, but overall, I think you guys did a great job, and I was very entertained and impressed.
I also thought that you guys did a fantastic job. I'm probably of the panelists, I'm probably your worst nightmare as a juror, though, because of the fact that I have a scientific background. I was actually a high school teacher as well too, so you have a lot of negatives going in that way as far as me being a jurist. But as far as my background is that I do a lot of technical litigation, and so my job pretty much day in, day out is to tear apart expert witnesses. I thought that you guys did a good job of understanding the basic science behind this case, which was good. I having been on a jury a few times, also as a lawyer, that the jury is going to do a lot to really try to protect any of the witnesses, in the case. And so you don't want to be that attorney that really argues with the witness. If the witness is not giving you what you want, you just ask the next question and get them to get them to where you want to be. You don't want to try to argue with them, because the jury really picks up on that, and really, as Judge Gabler said, that you want to use the judge to help you out when you're having a difficult witness there. So just be careful of that. I would say a couple other things is that as somebody who used to teach high school, and also recognize that high school's students' attention span is fairly short. Same with your jury, their attention span is going to be short, and you need to do things to try to capture their attention. And so sometimes you have to worry about your cadence of how you talk. So if you're like doing a rapid fire answer question, you might want to think about just breaking that up a little bit, because as somebody who's watching it, or just like when you're in class, if your teacher is going at a certain pace, you kind of you're like, it's the same pace, and you just feel on that roller coaster with that your teacher, right? So the same thing with the jury. As they're listening to you, and as the witnesses as well too, you want to break it up just a little bit so that you can make sure that the jury is paying attention to what you're saying. Let's see, the last thing I probably just want to say is, for me, English is a second language for me. I learned English, I probably learned English as a third language, if I think about this. But the rate of speed sometimes that you develop along with that cadence, you just got to be careful. There was times when I'm sure that either the court reporter or just other members of the jury would have just a hard time understanding what the question was. I thought the witnesses did a really good job of trying to solidify the speed in which they were giving the answers, but some of the questions, I was like, I didn't quite catch that. And so just if you just slow down just a little bit more. My trial practice coach used to always say that if you slow down to the point where you think that you're really, really slow, then you're probably talking at a normal speed. And so that's the only thing I would suggest on that. But overall, fantastic. I thought the level of professionalism to each other. I know that you had some back and forth with some of your objections, but I thought that you handled that very well, and that you were very professional with each other on that. So just overall great performance by everybody today. Thank you so much. It was fantastic watching you.
Yeah, and I'd excuse me, I'd echo everything you guys already heard. I thought it was a fantastic round overall. All of the witnesses did a good job and were very believable. The one thing I would say is, in the Zoom environment, it's especially important to maybe be almost a little over the top in order to make it interesting and to give us something to watch and engage in. And I thought a lot of you did a good job of hitting that line without going so over the top that we were like, what are we watching right now? So great job, witnesses. All of the directs and crosses, I agree with what all the other panelists said. Good job. Nothing super concerning jumped out at me. I was especially impressed by the openings and closings for both sides. You guys really laid out your story. It was easy to follow. We knew what you were going to present when the evidence started to come out, and you did a really good job summarizing at the end. So very impressive there. The one thing that really jumped out at me as maybe a constructive criticism was the point where Judge Kabler had to stop one of the exchanges between a witness and an attorney and kind of get it back on the track. And it's important to remember in a real courtroom, but especially on Zoom, that you can really cause a jury's eyes to glaze when you get that back and forth going so fast and talking over each other. And I was really glad the judge kind of stepped in there, because at that point I was like, what is happening? I can't even really tell who is saying what and what's going on. So just really keep in mind that you are presenting to a set of panelists, and sometimes that means you have to take a step back and realize, while it's sort of fun to engage in this heated exchange as a witness or as an attorney, sometimes it's important to remember you're presenting to other people. But other than that, I thought, like I said, fantastic round, and that was really the only thing that jumped out at me.
So let me add, there was two other things that I thought of when we were doing this. One is, and Skylar Weirs would never be qualified as an expert in my courtroom. The other thing is remember that when you're the attorney in a case, I always thought about it when I did trial work as you're essentially putting on a play, and as the attorney, you're the director, and your witnesses are the actors, and so you're giving them cues and things like that. And so it's important that, and I think that I can't remember who brought up this point, but when you get into these, when you get as the attorney, when you get into these exchanges with a witness, and the witness is being difficult, and it's obvious. I mean, it takes some experience, and it takes a little bit of insight to see, to pick up the jury's not going to like this witness. They're not answering my question. They're avoiding my question. Let that witness be their own worst enemy, as opposed to you as the attorney sort of meeting them on their down in their level. You sort of stay above the fray, and that's when you turn to the judge and say, Your Honor, can you please instruct the witness to answer the question? Or, Your Honor, move to strike, it's non-responsive. Then the judge is the one, then you're making the judge admonish the witness, and you look even better than being the sort of the person that gets down in the mud and fights with the witness. It's going to be difficult. And so I think that was the one thing that I thought that, that you all did really. I mean, it happens in trial. Trials get emotional. People, everyone's emotions run high. Witness control is an art that takes years to learn. And I don't know that I necessarily ever learned it completely. And I don't know that a lot of people do. But if you think about sort of you maintaining your demeanor, you being the cooler head in the room, then you're always going to look better than because like Paul said, juries can decide they hate the lawyer more than anything in the case. Right. And I thought you did Ashley, I thought you had a difficult witness to cross-examine. But you did a nice job of that. But I think you could acknowledge, you can be a little empathetic to her in some regards. And I thought that, I can't remember who did the direct on Dakota Weirs, but the only thing I thought on that was it's okay as a lawyer to display a little empathy for your client on the stand and give them time. If she's breaking up, do you need time? Or, just sort of humanize yourself in that regard. But otherwise, I mean, this was excellent. You folks were all really, really good, and I'm glad you're doing this, and you all have bright futures ahead of you. So, unless anybody has anything else, and we can all be dismissed, is there anything from any other of the panelists? Or
I'll just add one thing. Having sat on a couple juries before, I think that you want the attention of the jury to be on the witness and not on the attorney, and so. If you, as I'm mentioning, if you come across mean, or if you have that angry face kind of going on when you're asking that question, you didn't answer my question, and you can say that, you can see that rise. The jury's paying attention to that more than they're actually paying attention to the facts that you want your witness to really say, and so you want to be kind of the neutral element in the room to just drive the facts out of the witness, as opposed to having the jury pay attention to whether, oh, look, that person's really angry, or look, that person was extra mean to that witness. The jury actually talks about that, back in the jury room. That it's like, did you see that lawyer over there? She was really mean to that witness who's really sick, and that's what the focus gets on, and so it stays away from the facts. So that's the last thing I would add.
Okay. Jacob or Rosaline, anything further? All right. Well, everybody, thank you very much. Elizabeth, we can be excused, right?
Correct. And thank you, volunteers, for your time today.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Have a great afternoon and well done.